This is my Royal Enfield Classic 350. One of the biggest questions, and even topics of debate amongst riders, is if these 350s can be used on highways. And the answer to that just might surprise you, or maybe not. I have no idea what research you've done already, but I do have to point out one key thing. My Classic 350 is by no means stock. It's been modified with a handful of parts: a Stage 2 DNA filter kit, the full Hitchcock exhaust, a Fuelx Lite, and I have more that I have yet to install because it is the dead of winter, and quite frankly, I'm a bit lazy this time of year. With that said, I have of course taken this bike on the highway, both with it being stock and modified like how it is now, and yes, there is a very noticeable difference. I'll be brutally honest and as straightforward as I can be. A Classic 350, or really any of the various Royals with these 350J series engines, are not super thrilled about highway travel, at least when they are stock from the factory. They simply don't enjoy going past that 65-mile-an-hour mark, especially for prolonged periods of time. It struggles, it runs a bit rough, and it takes everything in its power to get to its top speed. My Classic 350, on the other hand, is a bit different. Now, if you've watched my Project Royal Enfield series so far, not only would you have known what I've done to the bike, but you would also know what each part has done to the bike in terms of performance. These parts, by the way, have only really cost me somewhere around the ballpark of under $800 US, which is a mere fraction of the amount it would cost me to do equivalent things on, say, my Kawasaki Versys, my Yamaha Bolt, or even my fiance's goofy little Benelli TNT 135. So as you probably already know, these 350s are an absolute blast in the city, the countryside roads, back roads, or really anything where that speed limit is 55 miles an hour or under. While highway travel ends up being a subject of a lot of debate between people who say it is possible while others say it isn't, for whatever various reasons. And I would tend to agree in the sense that yes, a bone stock 350 is not a great option for American highways. They're not built for that kind of travel here. And I'm sure a lot of people are saying or thinking, well, if you're wanting to go faster, get rid of the 350 and buy a bigger bike. Sure, that's all well and good. It's the obvious solution, and that doesn't even really need to be said. We all get it by now. But what about a modded 350 like mine? Does it make highway travel more feasible? It's not really a simple yes or no answer, but there are two areas that can pose a bit of a problem. One is that these 350s are capped at 75 miles an hour thanks to a speed limiter that's installed from the factory. People claim it's hidden in the electronics of the ABS system. I wouldn't know. I don't exactly have plans on messing with that. The other possible issue is that these 350s are by no means quick, meaning that their acceleration can pose a problem in certain scenarios. But let's talk more about both of these two things in specific. Let's first talk about the speed limiter. It is set at 75 miles an hour, which that really isn't much of an issue if it wasn't for the fact that these bikes have speedometers that read optimistic numbers. Mine, for example, would say 75 on the speedo, but in reality I'm only going maybe 72 or 73. I'm not unfamiliar with speedometers reading optimistic numbers. My Kawasaki does the same thing, and the Benelli was horrific when we first got it, reading over 13 miles an hour higher than actual speed. But thank God that bike only takes like 3 minutes to calibrate. Still a very annoying thing. To my understanding, neither the Kawasaki or the Royal can be calibrated, so I guess you're just kind of stuck with these optimistic speed readings. But why does this happen? Well, I know these manufacturers are allowed a certain percentage of error with speedometer readings, but only if they're reading higher than your actual speed. On the flip side, they cannot come out of the factory with pessimistic numbers, meaning if your speedometer is showing 55, but your actual speed is really 50, that would be a legal problem that would get these manufacturers in a ton of trouble. I know that was slightly off subject, but it's very important to point out regardless. Anyway, this is important because anyone out there thinking that throwing parts into their bike, expecting it to raise that top speed, is going to be very disappointed, unless of course you do bypass that speed limiter. Now, this whole thing has never really been a massive problem for me personally, but then I pick and choose which highways or toll roads to take and which ones to avoid like the plague. Like for example, I-80, I-94 to Chicago, 131 towards Kalamazoo, or I-94 to Detroit. Basically, any area where that speed limit is more of a suggestion than anything else. Sure, it might say 70 miles an hour, but realistically, everyone is going at the very least 80 miles an hour, and even if you are in that slow lane, people are going to drive up your ass, honk at you, flash their brights, give you the finger. In general, you're just putting yourself in a dangerous situation on a bike like this. But then we have that other area of concern I mentioned earlier about the 350s being slow with their acceleration. For reference, a 0 to 60 on a stock 350 is somewhere around the 14-second mark. That would make the acceleration of a stock bike somewhat comparable to that of a brand new Mitsubishi Mirage or an early 1990s Geo Metro LSI, which I do want desperately for God knows what reason. My bike as it sits right now can get to 60 miles an hour in approximately 11 seconds. 10 or under if I'm going downhill. And obviously, that's a major improvement over 14 seconds, but it's still not fantastic in certain circumstances. Normal day-to-day traffic is not an issue for me at all. Going through cities, townships, countryside roads, I'm all good with that. Highway, however, is an entirely different beast. You see, I bring up the 0 to 60 speed in particular because it does play a very integral role here with the on and off ramps. Specifically if the ramps involve going up a steep hill or those sharp low-speed curves. You see, if the traffic is dead, it's a non-issue, but then trying to go up one of those ramps during rush hour or even casual traffic, the bike simply doesn't have that power to get to speed quickly. If people aren't paying attention or flat out refuse to get out of the way so that you can merge safely, things can definitely get sketchy. Again, it comes down to knowing which roads to take and which ones not to take on a bike like this, if you were to desire to travel on these types of roads. Though, once I am traveling on the highway, or really any road where that speed limit is 55 to say 70, I have no problems at all. Obviously, it's not the type of bike where you have that drop a gear and disappear type power. It's not like that at all. My Versys 300 kinda has that, but these are completely different motorcycles. But it doesn't bother me at all because the Royal is just such a fun motorcycle to ride. It's super comfortable, relaxing, and it makes me smile every single time I ride it. I've yet to encounter any major problem with speed and acceleration. I'm able to do everything my other bikes can do for my typical commutes, but of course, not as quickly. And maybe I have to take a different road or two just to play it on the safer side of things, but that's fine. I don't ride this bike to get to my destination in a hurry. I'm sure that leads to people saying, well, why would you take this bike on the highway then? And the answer is really quite simple, because sometimes it is unavoidable, maybe easier in certain situations, and quite frankly, because I want to. And the parts that I have installed so far have made things significantly easier for me so that I can do these things and turn this classic 350 into more of a versatile daily rider. Either way, if you know the roads well enough, you can make highway travel work on a bike like this with the modifications that I've done to it. Is it the best bike for the task? God, no. That much is obvious to anyone that's ever been on any one of these bikes. Is it dumb to modify a bike like this instead of buying something more capable like my Yamaha? Yeah, probably. But if it's not your bike, does it really matter? I've never gotten mad at someone else's expense. And if I did, I'd be one hell of a miserable person. It's worth pointing out that yes, there are other parts and modifications that still can be done to the bike. The upgraded cam is a big one, and you could always change out the sprockets if you want. The cam is the one I'm most excited to see the results for whenever I do get around to buying it and having it installed. There's videos online of people riding with it and raving about how much it's made an impact to the bike and how awesome it is, but to my knowledge, no one has produced any 0 to 60 numbers before and after the cam. But that's all I got for you at this point. I hope I was able to help anyone out there that is curious about the subject or about how these mods have done with my little classic 350 so far. It is a great bike. It's super fun, and of all the motorcycles I've ride, the fastest ones out here, this one's pretty high up there. I absolutely love this goofy little classic 350. It is gorgeous and a hell of a lot of fun. So with that said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you again, and as always, take care and ride safe. Or at least try.